you doing? Hardy folk coming the day before 4th of July for this very civic event. Thank you so much for showing up. Kyle Palmer, my day job is doing the morning news for KCUR 89.3 Kansas City Public Radio. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank the Shawnee Mission Area Council PTA as well for holding this event. I used to be a middle and high school English teacher, and we had an event like this last night for the 17th and 23rd district candidates, and I will say to you what I used to say to my class as a little trick. Last night's candidates were very good, and so I'm expecting you all to be just as good tonight. And the questions from the audience last night were also very good, so I'm expecting questions from you all to be very good tonight. The structure of this, before the candidates introduce themselves, they will introduce themselves first, and then the debate will kind of be broken up into two big parts. First part is predetermined questions written by the members of the Shawnee Mission Area Council on a variety of topics ranging from school safety to school funding to transparency in government, all kinds of different topics. I'll be picking those randomly out of a basket. The second half of the debate will be questions from you. So I think Kathy handed out index cards. If you've not gotten an index card or two, just ask her for one. She's sitting right up here up front. Have a pretty intimate crowd tonight, so write down as many questions as you want. We can get through as many of those in the second half of the debate. And the schedule says to kind of end up around 8 o'clock. The candidates, I believe, will be sticking around for a little bit if you want to meet them and talk with them face to face. But we will be done right around 8 o'clock, and I do have some fireworks to get to tonight, so we will be stopping at 8. Okay, so the first part of this is the candidates and their surrogates who will be introducing themselves. You get 2 minutes to give an opening statement, so we'll start closest to me with Steve Gordon. Go ahead.
Fine. Should I pull this mic closer to me?
Sure, you can just take it out of its holder, just make sure it's on, or you can keep it in the holder and just bring it up close.
If you can hear me, that's good. I'll try and, I wrote notes to myself so that I wouldn't ramble. Kathy is a nurse midwife, and she has a mother in labor right now, so I'm filling in for her, and moms tend to get a little nervous when their doctor leaves when they go into labor, so I'm glad to fill in for her. She's the smart one of the two of us. I wrote notes so that I wouldn't ramble, because I can ramble. She's a co-founder of Mercy and Truth Medical Missions. She's the CEO of that organization for 17 years. She's a nurse practitioner, certified nurse midwife. She's a co-founder, co-owner, and provider of New Birth Company. The list of local and national boards that she has and does serve on is too long to read here, but it's on her card, and we brought those outside. Suffice it to say, she's considered a leader in the birthing center movement and a powerful proponent of women's health, especially as it pertains to advocating natural childbirth with certified care. She's an active member of the Kansas Board of Healing Arts Certified Nurse Midwife Council. She authored and published books and articles. She's served as a healthcare provider in clinics and on teams all over the world. Just recently, and I'm talking about just this last week, she returned from 2 weeks providing in a small clinic just inside the Syrian border. She is a mother of 4, grandmother of 11, and the wife of a music educator for 39 years. She's one child who attended Shawnee Mission School, Shawnee Mission North, and one is currently the head boys soccer coach at Shawnee Mission South High School. Our other son is a major in the United States Air Force, and she's been a military mom since at least 2004. She's socially and fiscally conservative. She knows what it means to serve others. In fact, that's her heart. She comes from a long line of successful entrepreneurs, and she knows the sacrifice involved in making payroll because families depend upon it. Her track record is that she's not afraid to start something when she notices a need, and she's not intimidated when it comes to leadership. And I'm pleased to represent her today, and that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you, sir. Okay.
There's a switch right there on the mic. If you want to turn it on, it probably helps other people to hear for sure.
Oh, the mic was off.
Yeah.
No, it's on.
Okay.
Good.
Hi, my name is Andrew Hurla. You can call me Andrew or Andy. I'm challenging Cindy Neighbor in the Democratic primary. She's the incumbent. I don't want to take Cindy out. In fact, I'm sure Jenkins is shooting fireworks already. I think he has a little more experience. It might be his year, but I have some fresh ideas for the state of Kansas. First of all, when I went to this Kansas Policy Institute briefing for political candidates, I had to add this lettering myself, these words down here. And incentives. We need to create accountability, recognition, and incentives for high school students. So that's the first part of my agenda, incentivizing academic achievement for high school students so that when they attend and they achieve, they earn community college tuition when they graduate. The second thing is to qualify more jobs for student loan forgiveness. There's many people, many millennials who want to work just like baby boomers. They went to school, we were listening well, we were told, go to college. Well, over the last decade, we've tripled the cost of college. So we must qualify more jobs for student loan forgiveness. And then the third thing I want to get introduced in the legislative body is a mortgage assistance program for recent college graduates, from associates to doctorate. So that when they start working, they have their degrees, they have a state that's going to support them buying a home. And again, I have a lot of respect for Cindy and her husband Jim, and I want to thank you for inviting me, and that's all I have.
Good evening. It's nice to see all of you out here on the eve of the 4th of July, and on this hot evening. It's supposed to cool off, so, you know, there's hope. I've served in the legislature the last 2 years. Prior to that, I was out for 6 years, and prior to that, I was in for 6 years. So you can call me a retread. So in for 6, out for 6, back for 2, and wanting to do more. When I first started in the political realm, I started in PTA in the Shawnee Mission School District many years ago. My husband and I have 4 children. We've been married 48 years. We still get along. And anyway, community service, civic service has been a large part of my life. From working with CASA to the Junior League of Wyandotte and Johnson Counties. I worked on the Ronald McDonald Board. I have worked on the Board of Indigent Defense Services for the state, and also the emergency medical team at the state level. I am past president from 2001 for the KASB, which is the Kansas Association of School Boards, and I served on the Shawnee Mission School Board for 21 years, and before that 13 years on the advisory board, which was an elected position at that time. So my devotion to education has been long, over 33 years, and community service, working with the rescue squad and those groups in the community, are very, very important to me. Shawnee Mission PTA was a great teacher, and from there, education became a huge part of what I did. I am a retired medical administrator, last 11 years. I worked in dentistry. Before that, I actually worked 9 years for the Shawnee Mission School District. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introductions. The first part of this, again, will be predetermined questions that I'll select out of the basket. I believe you've received the general topic areas, but not the exact questions. How this will work is I'll start this first round down again towards the side closest to me, advance down. Next question, we'll start with the next person and come back so that each person gets a chance to start first on a question and be first to answer. A couple of things to note. You might have noticed Denise with the time. She will be showing you 30 seconds and 15 seconds. So if you're getting close, you can be looking for those bright green papers that she's holding up. And also, just in case if you mention someone else up here by name in your answer, I'll give that person a chance to respond. Are we ready? All right, so I'll select the first question. We'll start with Steve Gordon, standing in for Kathy Gordon, and all 3 of you will answer this question. Some legislators are calling for a constitutional amendment to restrict the authority of the judicial branch over the legislative branch regarding the adequate funding of K-12 public education. Where do you stand on this proposal?
I'm going to stand because it's easier. I saw you stand, so you set the example. I'm going to follow that. Kathy and I were just talking about this last night. I believe that it's an overreach of the judicial branch from a standpoint of the Constitution to be funding the schools. It's the responsibility of the legislature because they represent the people and they have the voice of the people whispering in their ear, which is the design of government. And so it should be the people who are talking about how we fund schools. The responsibility of the legislature is to determine whether decisions that are made by the courts align with the Constitution, align with the purpose of the Constitution. So I believe that they're stepping outside of their realm, and when the legislature makes statements like they do sometimes, they step outside their bounds. We lose the voice of the people in the decisions with regards to school funding. So that's where Kathy stands on that.
Thank you. I have this fact book about public education from the Kansas Policy Institute. We met last week. And I've met with Dr. Mathers recently, actually this year. She's the Chief Financial Officer of the Kansas City, Kansas School District. They're the primary district involved in that litigation. I think we can find answers in legislation that the judiciary is going to support. And I think creating incentives for academic achievement is one of those legislative agendas the judiciary would support without intervening. That is what I believe. Thank you.
We have three branches of government: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. The judicial is here to interpret the law as the legislators have written it. And that's the checks and balance system that has to be in place for all of those systems to work. One's not more important than the other, but they are a check and balance. I oppose any kind of constitutional amendment. First, it has unintended consequences long-term that people have no idea how far-reaching that is. The courts have followed and held on to this case because the legislature did not uphold its promise when it promised to fund schools earlier, and that's why the Gannon case has continued on. If the legislature had continued to fund what the promises were, we would not be having a problem today, but we didn't do that. So it is our responsibility to listen to what the courts have said and to fulfill that obligation. The other thing is, this had a piece to the act that said if the courts found anything wrong with it, that the whole act was dead. That was taken out during the last court hearing. So it allowed the courts to come in and say, this is specifically what we're looking for. And that's what the state had asked for. Give us guidelines as to what we need to do. Thank you very much.
And the next question will begin with Andrew Hurla. What is the state's responsibility towards higher education? Should more be done by the Kansas legislature to encourage more Kansas youth to attend college?
Yeah, definitely more should be done. What we know is that for 10th grade assessments, college readiness is not what it should be. I think if we incentivize academic achievement with community college tuition, maybe we can change that. There's other ways to improve college readiness, but I think a statewide curriculum that includes drawing your education plan for 5 to 10 years when you're in the 10th grade. I know we're all well past that, but if you can try to imagine that for yourself, you're in the 10th grade, you're in high school, part of your grade, to earn your good grade, you have to draw your education plan for 5 to 10 years. And it can stay right here in Kansas, or it can leave Kansas. But we want it to stay, right? So you can draw your 5 to 10 year education plan in the 10th grade for a grade. Call it a study curricula, study planning. That's something the state of Kansas can do that I would support as a legislature.
Higher education has suffered severe cuts over the last, during Brownback's tenure. During that time, colleges and universities were making cuts in staff and in money. This past year, we reinstated about 12 to 14 million of that dollars. That's still a drop in the bucket, but we need to continue to do that. The other thing we have to look at is not all students are prepared or want to go to a 4-year college. They may be better suited for a technical college. So I know in Shawnee Mission and in many of the other districts surrounding us in Johnson County, they look at college and career readiness. That's a combination of technical careers, of which we need many. Truck drivers alone are going to have a shortage of 50,000 over the next couple of years. That's going to be detrimental to shipping. We do have incentives in Shawnee Mission. We have the College Now program. We have where they can take AP honors courses. I know my daughter took 35 hours and was done with her freshman year before she ever got to KU. She knew she wanted to be a doctor. She said 1 less year on 12 years is worth picking up some extra courses. We also have the availability in Shawnee Mission to help those students that are in need that cannot afford to do the tests for the College Now programs. That, in essence, provides those students the opportunity to look into courses that they can take in coordination with their courses here in Shawnee Mission and have college courses when they graduate. That's a wonderful opportunity heading into post-secondary. Thank you.
I would agree with the statement that that funding has been cut seriously for secondary education, or for higher education in the state. And I agree that we need to increase incentives for students to go to college and technical training, because there are a lot of opportunities that don't have anything to do with a college degree. We've all known for years that the college isn't the answer for every child. I'm an educator, have been for 39 years, and college just simply isn't the answer for every child. And to that extent, I'm involved in a program where I teach that has to do with the very college credits you were talking about. I think that's a great incentive, and it saves parents money. And so, yes, I believe that the legislature needs to look for more opportunities to keep higher education where it needs to be. And we have a wonderful set of community colleges in the state. We have the best college in the state right here in Johnson County. So we need to continue to keep what's good, good, and look for ways to bring up the standards of those that are struggling for finances.
Cindy Neighbor will start the next question. How can the state legislature assist the fast-growing school districts in the metro areas, as well as the rural school districts which are experiencing declining enrollment?
One of the parts of the new school finance law, and it was in the old school finance law, is high enrollment weighting, and they have low enrollment weighting. So that's kind of the opposite for each end of the spectrum. So that districts that have greater growth are going to be able to count that, as well as the lower districts. So that's one of the parts of the school finance law. One of the issues in school finance is the difficulty between what people look at as the haves and the have-nots. And we have a lot of districts in western Kansas that feel like we are, quote, the goose that lays the golden egg as far as taxes and money to the state. And that we don't have poverty, and that we don't have unemployment, or we don't have homelessness. That's not true. We are one of the fastest growing counties in all of those areas. And that tells a tale in itself. We must continue to work with small, medium, and large districts when the school finance program is done, because it's going to incorporate, hopefully, what will work for all districts to the best of the legislature's ability. I don't know if there's any perfect school finance law to address all of these, because the needs are so diverse. But there is an attempt, and there are people talking and discussing, and hopefully when the final school, when the school finance law is finally approved by the courts, we will have something that would be beneficial, not only to Johnson County schools, but Hayes and Garden City and other districts around the state of Kansas. This is about compromise.
And I would agree that Johnson County has that. In fact, I'm the chairman of the board for Mercy and Truth Medical Missions, and we serve the underserved, which are people who work, but they can't afford health insurance, and they can't afford a lot of other things. The highest population of underserved is in Johnson County. because people who are in the service industry like to locate themselves, need to locate themselves near the kind of people who are going to hire them to do that, those kind of things. We also have situations where we have a higher incidence of single-parent families now, and we need to serve those people. And so as we continue this discussion, we need to find ways to finance this. And the goose that lays the golden egg, we get into property taxes and how are we funding it, and who's producing the revenue. And what we need to do is make sure that the revenues are looked at with an even eyeball, so that people don't want to reach in and grab, but so that we have an eye towards whatever policies we set for funding the schools is also good for those in Western County, Western Kansas, Western counties, so that whatever formula we have acknowledges that we have a local funding base, but it also acknowledges that we need to take care of the poor and those who are underserved.
When I start talking about the school finance taxes and the laws, first I want to do is start a little history lesson, because they're 100 years old now. It was 100 years ago we created the taxes, and they were to end child labor exploitation. Public education has done that successfully over the last 100 years. There's something to celebrate about that. There's something to celebrate about education and what it has done for people, certainly. And it can help people rise out of poverty. And incentives for academic achievement can do that, certainly. And it would have to be statewide. I'm definitely not just thinking about Johnson County. I'm thinking about Douglas County. I'm thinking about Sedgwick County, Ellis County, certainly. But Johnson County, there's hundreds of students each year who could use those incentives to create a better plan for themselves at Johnson County Community College. And I hope that we can write that into new school finance laws.
The next question will begin with Steve Gordon. Some Kansas legislators have questioned the State Board of Education's authority to establish K-12 public education state standards. What is your position, and what do you think of the Kansans Can vision? And don't ask me what that is, Phil.
Yeah, unfortunately, I am not familiar with the Kansas Can vision, but I'll certainly have to study up on that. I know Kathy's stance is that the local school boards should be setting the standards, should be the source for the standard. Our school just went through accreditation, and so the authority of the state to establish the standards for the state schools, I think, should be responsive to those who are educators, in terms of they should be answering to and doing so with the information that they're getting from those who have their feet on the ground, their boots on the ground, and that is the educators. Sometimes the entities who govern aren't totally aware of what the people are doing on the ground. For instance, the state school board should be responding to what they hear from the local school districts in terms of this is what's working in our district, this is what educators are saying that we need to do, and this is what we need in our classrooms, which I think is the most important.
Thank you so much, Kyle. I have no comment, unless you want to repeat the question.
Yeah, I can read the question again. So some Kansas legislators have questioned the State Board of Education's authority to establish the K-12 public education state standards. What is your position? And if you have an opinion, what do you think of the Kansans Can vision?
I have no comment. Thank you, Kyle.
The Kansas State School Board is really the guiding force with the expertise to set the standards. Now, that does not take control away from local school districts. The good thing is local school districts then go and set their own curriculum. What it is a set of standards at the state level, and if we are going to compete with other states across the United States, whether it's college career readiness or whatever it's called at the federal level, the issue is the standards have to be the same in order to equate the accomplishment of how that state is meeting those standards. And the nice thing about that is that local school districts then formulate teacher groups, administrators, teachers, resource personnel, students into committees, and they look at that curriculum and they look at the books they're going to use, and does this provide us the information we need to meet the standards that the state is requiring. The state school board has looked at Kansas Can in finding and placing some schools in a particular, well, it's actually across the state of Kansas. And they're giving them a set of curriculum and standards that they're all going to work with to see if that helps fill the gaps and if it helps those districts have better oversight and accomplishment and achievement, within their school district. So it's kind of a trial. If it works, great, it can be shared. If it doesn't work, at least it's been tried, and districts have had that opportunity.
The next question will begin with Andrew Hurla. What policies and practices could be implemented to increase the number of teachers in the state?
I think if we're talking about millennials, we need to make sure that everyone is aware of how they can manage their debt if they're going to get certificated. Because we have created some strict certification standards for our public schools. If you're going to be a teacher in our public schools, you must be certificated. It's a long process. You can go into debt doing it. So we need to make sure everyone's aware that if they take on that debt because they want to serve students, they can have those debts forgiven when they're serving. And there's actually more jobs that we need to qualify for student loan forgiveness that our state could take the lead on. The state of Kansas could. So that's all I have to say about that.
Retain. Next time I'll leave it on so it doesn't do this. Attracting and retaining quality teachers is always the goal of any district that you visit. Everybody wants qualified teachers who are certified in their field of expertise, so they are the best and the brightest in the field. A couple of things can happen to incentivize. Areas of difficulty in filling positions in the STEM area, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. In areas of possibly foreign language, in the sciences, physics, advanced physics, any of those courses. And to incentivize teachers who are coming out of college to say there will be a debt reduction if you teach in this area for 5 years. Some communities already have that. And it's an opportunity. It's more in rural areas than it is in our area because the need is higher and finding people qualified in those areas is much more difficult. We could also, the other issue that we need to look at is traveling, educating, and meeting with teachers from all over the United States. So not only do we get the best and brightest, but we get that mix of diversity. We get the male and the female, and we get African Americans, and we get Indians, and that right there makes a difference sometimes when you have a man teaching in kindergarten. I know that's odd, but the kids love it. And or you have a woman teaching advanced biology or physics. The respect that comes with that is enormous, and we need to work at creating and doing more of that as we reach out to look for highly qualified teachers.
And I would add, I think that there are, because I am a teacher, there are lots of people who have left the teaching field because of the difficulties inherent in it. We can do a better job of putting a good face on the profession of teaching. There are programs, she mentioned programs they have in the rural schools, and I think these are working, where you incentivize teachers to come and teach for 5 years, and they cancel some or all of their debt. I'd like to see the legislature work more with not only just rural school districts and districts who are finding a difficulty having teachers who want to move, way out into what they consider nowhere. But also we have teachers in the urban core. We have districts in the urban core that need good teachers. And we need to incentivize teachers to go in and teach in places where it's a challenge to teach. And we need to bring honor to that and put a good face on. I have heard in my lifetime several times, those who can't do, teach. That is so not true. Some of us choose to teach, and we choose to teach well because we feel called to do that. And we need to find those people and encourage them into that, and find ways to come alongside the districts that are looking for good people, who maybe they can get a teacher who's good to come and stay, and not only improve the quality of the school, but improve the quality of the community. I came from a small town, and I remember asking my mom, why is it all the good teachers leave? I understand now, we're looking for a good place to teach and support our family, but the legislature can definitely help with that.
We're a little bit more than halfway through the scheduled portion of this half of the debate, where I'm plucking questions out of the basket. But if you have a question that you want to ask, or an area that you are particularly impassioned about, you have those index cards. Write down a question, write down multiple questions, and Kathy will be collecting those over the next 10 or 15 minutes, and that will serve as the basis for the second half of this. So we're going to have about another 10 to 15 minutes of predetermined questions written by members of the Shawnee Mission Area Council, and then we'll take your questions as well. So if you want more index cards, ask Kathy for more index cards, and we'll try to get through as many of your questions as we can. After saying that, I forgot where we were at in our order. Okay, Cindy, we'll start with you with this next question. What policies and initiatives do you feel the state can enact to help ensure the safety of students and teachers at school?
This past year, I serve as ranking D on insurance. We had a presentation by a group that wanted to have teachers carry guns in the classroom. I can tell you that the emails I received on that were a little over 300 negative. And we had 3 people speak positively to the issue. We are lucky in Shawnee Mission that John Douglas has done such a great job on safety and security in our schools. We have what we call pinch points, and that's when you come in the door, you have to ring in, you have to go through the general office before you come in the building. Our schools have been pretty well equipped, up-to-date technology. They can see the back of the building, the front, the sides, and the doors. Not every district is like that. In districts that they don't have funding available, we passed a law this year that puts $5 million into that system. I can tell you right now, $5 million will not go very far. It cost us millions and millions of dollars to update the buildings that we have just in Shawnee Mission, I'm sorry. But many districts aren't as large as we are. But if you go out and visit some of them, they have not been updated in years, and they really don't have the capital outlay to do it. So what we need to do is have